He had everything: money, power, and the kind of arrogance that comes when a man forgets he's human. Richard Hale, a billionaire CEO, walked into a five-star restaurant one night like he owned not just the building, but the air inside it. Waiters scrambled, guests whispered, and his bodyguards cleared the way as though a king had arrived. Richard loved this attention. He thrived on it. To him, everyone else was background noise. But fate had placed someone in his path that night, a young black waitress named Maya, who worked 2 shifts back-to-back just to keep her little boy alive. Her son was ill, and though her feet ached and her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, she carried something in her pocket that gave her strength, a tiny handmade gift carved by her son. When she placed Richard's steak in front of him, her hands trembled, but she gathered her courage, reached into her apron, and softly said, "Sir, I know this may seem strange, but I wanted to give you something." From her pocket, she pulled out a small box, wrapped clumsily in old newspaper with a child's ribbon tied around it. Richard raised an eyebrow, and his wealthy companions snickered. Still, Maya set it down gently, whispering, "It's from my son. He says this brings hope." Richard tore the wrapping without care. Inside lay a simple wooden keychain, the word hope carved shakily across it. His guests laughed louder. Richard's lip curled into a sneer as he dropped it straight into a glass of water and waved for a guard. "Throw this trash out," he ordered. "I don't need pity from people like you." The laughter around the table grew, but Maya's heart sank. She bowed her head, blinked away tears, and walked back into the shadows of the restaurant, carrying the heavy silence of humiliation. To her, that keychain was her son's belief in miracles. To Richard, it was nothing but garbage. Hours later, Richard's limousine glided through the glowing city streets. He leaned back, smug, replaying the admiration in the restaurant. But arrogance is fragile and destiny waits patiently. Taking a shortcut through a darker district, his driver slammed the brakes, too late. A van screeched across the road, blocking their path. Doors burst open, and armed men spilled out like shadows with knives and steel pipes. Glass shattered. Shouts filled the night, and Richard was dragged out of his luxury car. The CEO, who had mocked kindness, was suddenly reduced to a trembling man on his knees. "Empty your pockets!" one thug barked. Watches, wallet, phone, everything was ripped away. But one man noticed something odd in the torn seam of Richard's suit. From the pocket slipped a damp, crumpled object. It was the wooden keychain. The same one he had mocked, now glowing faintly beneath the harsh streetlight. "Wait," the thug whispered, picking it up, his voice breaking. Where did you get this?" Richard froze, too shaken to answer. The gang leader snarled, "Forget it, let's finish him!" But the thug clutched the keychain tighter, his hands trembling. "This is Maya's work," he said, eyes wide. "I know it. I owe her my life. Years ago, I was bleeding out in that diner. Everyone ignored me, except her. She pressed her scarf against my wound, called for help, and stayed until I lived. I can't hurt anyone connected to her, not ever." Silence fell. The leader swore under his breath, but he saw the determination in his man's eyes. With a frustrated wave, he ordered his crew to leave. Just like that, the men disappeared into the night, and Richard collapsed against the pavement, gasping for air, staring at the word hope. For the first time in years, he felt fear and gratitude for something money couldn't buy. That night, in his penthouse, Richard didn't touch his expensive wine or scroll through his stocks. He sat alone in silence, the city skyline behind him, the keychain resting on his palm. He turned it over and over, the carved letters cutting into his conscience. This worthless piece of wood had stopped a knife from slicing through his throat. This scrap of kindness had more power than all his millions. He thought of Maya, her trembling voice, her quiet dignity. the humiliation he had caused. Shame burned inside him stronger than any whiskey. He realized something terrifying. For all his wealth, he was the poorest man in that restaurant. The next morning, the diner buzzed with customers. Maya, exhausted but smiling faintly, poured coffee for truck drivers and served plates of pancakes to families. She carried the same tired grace she always did, unaware that the man who had ruined her night was about to walk back into her life. The bell over the door jingled, and Richard stepped in, not in his armor of arrogance, but humbled, without guards, his suit plain, his face softened. Conversations in the diner hushed, but he walked straight to her. Maya froze, tray in hand, unsure if this was another cruel trick. Richard set a velvet box on the counter and spoke softly, his voice carrying none of the sharpness it once had. "Maya," he said, almost ashamed, "I came to return what belongs to you, and to say thank you." He opened the box, and inside lay the keychain, polished, preserved, and framed in gold. Maya's eyes widened as he placed it gently before her. Then, sliding a check across the counter, he whispered, "This will cover your son's treatment, your debts, your dreams. I mocked your kindness, but it saved my life. And it taught me that real wealth isn't power. It's compassion." Maya's hands shook as tears spilled freely. Her little boy, frail but smiling, ran into her arms. She pulled him close and whispered, "See, baby, hope is real." Around them, the diner's chatter softened into silence, and for a moment, even the world outside seemed to pause. The billionaire, who once believed himself untouchable, stood with his head bowed, humbled by a woman he had dismissed. And as the boy clutched the golden-framed keychain, the camera lingered on the word etched into wood, hope. The moral was undeniable: never underestimate kindness. The smallest gift, given with love, can change everything. Sometimes the things we throw away as worthless are the very treasures that save our lives.